So what type of jobs do you plan to bring here? Will they be green collar, blue collar, white collar, and how specifically do you plan to do that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you about three different things I think we need to do. One is, and only national federal elected officials can do this, we need to revamp our foreign policy. There's the reams written about that, but the main goal needs to be to ship more products overseas and stop shipping jobs overseas. A foreign trade policy, I should add, a trade policy that really fights for folks here in Northeast Indiana. The other thing I want to mention is with regard to, you mentioned white collar and blue collar. I'm going to talk about green. It's a little bit of an worn out word, but there are a lot of different ways that we can bring more jobs and better jobs to this area that relate to our need to become energy independent, in which I firmly believe. One is we need to work really hard to build rail in the United States. I was in our prior congressman's office, and he said, when I talked about passenger rail about 5 or 6 years ago, it's dead. Quote, it's dead. And which was very frustrating to me. Despite that, I got together with another half dozen people and fought really hard to try to bring more passenger, I want to emphasize, and freight rail to this region. We need to rebuild rail. We have a lot of folks in this area who can build a lot of things. We can build rail at SDI in Whitley County. We can build rail cars. Getting off the rail for a moment, we can also build efficient vehicles in this area. Again, good workers, good work ethic, good reputation in this area. I need to point out also with regard to the farmers, biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel. I actually think the government needs to actively participate in research so that maybe 25 years from now, or 40 years from now, or maybe 10 years from now, rather than seeing mainly corn and soybeans driving down the road, we'll see some other crop, which is a high energy production crop, and that will help make us energy independent, which I think is very important for the pocketbook and for the security of folks here in the USA.
What if anything? What if anything do you think needs to be addressed with education and jobs?
Well, I've read a lot about what guys who I admire have to say. Warren Buffett, for instance, other individuals. And they say repeatedly the greatest hope for good, solid jobs here in the United States of America, the Midwest, Northeast Indiana, the Midwest, and the entire U.S. is to ramp up education in the United States of America. I was around during the time of Sputnik. Remember 1957? That was a satellite that rotated around, the Russians put in the sky, and the thought was, if the Russians can do that, they can nuke us. So there was a sense of emergency. We have to push science, math, tech education in the United States of America. I think that's why I was a biology major and got interested in science, because of that environment. We need to create that type of a mood and attitude here in the United States of America. It needs to not just be elected officials of both parties. It needs to be business leaders, labor leaders, rock stars. We need to have a huge movement to push science, math, tech, all education, literacy as well in the United States of America. And I'm not just talking about college education, but tech education, training for folks who've been tossed out of their jobs, huge, massive educational push. And that, I want to strongly emphasize, I think our educational system is basically structured right with our having 50 different state educational systems. I'm not talking about the federal government in any way, shape, or form, like controlling education. I'm talking about the federal government using the bully pulpit, so to speak, legislators, our president, business leaders, labor leaders, to push the concept of education, make all parents, all kids want to say, we need to get a really good education for our kids, because that's their best hope for good jobs in the future.
I apologize, I couldn't get up here. Could you go through your thoughts on the special election one more time for me? Do you think that it should be now? Do you think that we should wait till November?
Well, I think that I've always been, I will say, a good government guy. Spent a lot of time talking to Professor Mike Downs, who's an honored, now late professor in this area, about government in general. I firmly believe that literally even as of right now, we should have a representative in place. I don't think any district in the United States of America should not be represented in the House of Representatives, which is often described as the people's house. The elections occur every 2 years, and it's very chaotic. This was to make sure that the people would have instant, fairly close to instant response of their elected officials going to Washington, D.C. And we're actually talking about a fourth of our prior congressman's term 4 5 months anyway, from June until November at least. If the election isn't until November, 5 months. That's pushing a fourth of the entire 2-year term, when there will not be an actual elected official in the House of Representatives representing this area. So I do not think the taxpayer should spend 1 cent on any special election, early special election. Other folks, we've got the Secretary of State's office. They have a few $1 million budget. They can figure it out. But we need an earlier special election. I think would be better. Not 1 cent from the taxpayers. Absolutely.
You don't think that the House being and Congress being out on recess right now makes a difference on that?
You know, something could come up tomorrow. I mean, there could be a national crisis tomorrow. The House and the Senate could be called into session, and what kind of representation would the citizens of this area have? And we all know, anybody that's been around for 10 or 20 or 40 or 50 years know things can change fast in the United States of America when we need to have 435 members of the House and 100 senators sitting there debating, discussing, voting.